Elijah Matthews stood by his pottery wheel, the harsh winter winds howling outside his modest workshop. His hands trembled, not from the cold, but from the weight of the memories that came with every cold gust of wind. A memory of a night like this, 5 years ago, when a storm had taken everything from him. It had been a snowy December evening when he received the call that changed his life forever. His wife Sarah and their young daughter Emma had been in a tragic car accident on a slick mountain road. Elijah had been left alone, his world shattered, with only the memory of his family to cling to. He couldn't bear to let go of the past, and every winter, as the snow fell and the wind howled, the grief crept back into his bones, deepening with each passing year. This night was no different. The snowstorm was relentless, fierce, as it painted the world outside in a blinding blanket of white. Elijah's heart beat heavily in his chest, and his hands ached as they hovered over the clay. The smell of his workshop, rich with the scent of wet earth, brought a strange comfort. But it wasn't enough to erase the hollow ache inside him. Suddenly, a sound pierced the storm. It wasn't the usual whistle of wind or the groan of creaking wood. It was something alive, something that didn't belong in the cold night. Elijah froze, his fingers still coated in clay, as a faint whimper reached his ears, tugging at something deep inside him. His thoughts raced. Had he heard it before? Was it the wind, or was it something else? Another whimper. This time, it was louder, desperate. Elijah's feet moved instinctively, carrying him toward the door. Not again, he whispered, stepping into the cold abyss of winter. He pulled the door open with a creak, and there, illuminated by the faint glow of his porch light against the swirling snow, stood a golden retriever. But it wasn't just any dog. Her amber eyes were filled with pain, and her swollen belly hinted at the life she carried inside her. But what truly stopped Elijah in his tracks was the strange, star-shaped mark inside her right ear, barely visible beneath the frost-covered fur. Elijah felt his heart lurch. This wasn't just a random stray, he realized. This dog was seeking him out, and there was something about her that felt strangely familiar, something that sent a shiver through his bones. Welcome to the HeartForce channel, where you and I find more meaning in life through stories about dogs. Before we continue, please comment below and let us know where you are listening to this video from. And if you have any stories about your dog, feel free to share them with everyone. As Elijah crouched down to meet the dog, his breath caught in his throat. She was trembling, but there was something in her eyes that spoke volumes. Trust, desperation, and yet, as she stood there, her eyes locked onto his with a knowing calm. It was as if she had come to him not just for shelter, but for salvation. The wind howled louder, and the snow flurried around them. Elijah took a step forward, his mind racing. This dog had been through something. Her injuries were not just physical. They spoke of a past filled with pain and hardship. She didn't belong on this mountain, not in the heart of this storm, not in the cold of this cruel winter. "Come on, girl," Elijah muttered softly, his voice hoarse from the years of silence. "Let's get you inside." The golden retriever took a cautious step forward, and then another, her head held low, her swollen belly brushing against the ground. She wasn't just seeking warmth. Elijah realized she was asking for protection, for something more than just the relief of the storm. She was asking for a refuge. As Elijah led her into his home, the familiar ache of his isolation gnawed at him. His home had been empty for so long. The silence was deafening, but now, with this dog, it felt different. The quiet was somehow comforting, a shared silence. And for the first time in years, Elijah didn't feel quite so alone. The dog lay on the rug in front of the fire, her amber eyes flickering with the light. Elijah knelt down beside her, gently brushing the frost from her fur, revealing a series of old scars and injuries. He winced at the sight of her torn skin. But what caught his attention most was the star-shaped tattoo inside her right ear, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to fall into place. "Bella," he whispered to the dog, feeling the weight of the name on his lips. It wasn't just the look in her eyes that had reminded him of Sarah's dog, Charlie. It was the mark, The unmistakable star-shaped tattoo that had been on Charlie's ear, too. His hands trembled as he picked up the dog's leg, inspecting her wounds. There was no doubt about it. Bella had been through hell. The signs were clear. Her swollen belly was the last clue he needed. Bella was pregnant, and soon she would give birth to a litter of puppies that would change everything. His heart raced as the pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. Bella wasn't just a lost stray. She was a dog in need of help. But she was also part of something far darker, something Elijah had hoped would never come near his doorstep again. The storm outside raged on. But inside Elijah's workshop, the warmth of the fire offered some semblance of peace. Bella lay quietly in front of it, her eyes closed, her breathing slow and steady. Elijah could hear the crackle of the logs, the steady rhythm of his own heart, but his mind raced with questions that refused to settle. How had Bella ended up on his doorstep, so far from safety? And why had she come to him? The silence was shattered by a soft knock at the door. Elijah tensed, his instincts flaring. Who could be out there at this hour, in this storm? The knock came again, this time louder and more insistent. He cautiously moved to the door, heart in his throat. When he opened it, there stood Dr. Grace Thompson, her dark brown hair windswept and eyes weary from the storm. She had been the town's beloved veterinarian for years, and Elijah trusted her implicitly. But the urgency in her gaze told him that something was wrong. "Is she here?" Dr. Thompson asked, her voice low and measured. "Elijah," she said, before he could speak, "we need to talk." They moved to the warmth of the living room, where Bella, still curled up by the fire, seemed to sense the shift in the air. Dr. Thompson's professional composure cracked slightly as she knelt beside Bella, examining the dog's condition with practiced hands. The more she examined, the darker her expression became. "This dog has been through hell," Dr. Thompson said quietly, her fingers gently tracing the scars along Bella's back. She looked up, meeting Elijah's gaze. "You can see it in her eyes. She's not just a stray. This is no accident." Elijah swallowed hard, his heart pounding in his chest. He had suspected something was wrong. Bella's condition, the mysterious mark in her ear, her swollen belly, it all pointed to something darker, something far more sinister than he was willing to believe. "This isn't the first time I've seen a dog like this," Dr. Thompson continued. "These kind of injuries, they come from a breeding operation, a puppy mill." Elijah felt the words hit him like a physical blow. He had heard rumors of such places, whispered stories of cruelty, but he had never truly understood what it meant until now. Bella wasn't just a lost dog. She was a victim of something far worse, something that had been hiding in plain sight. "This is bad, Elijah," Dr. Thompson said, her voice thick with emotion. "The people responsible for this, they've been operating in town for a while now. Under the guise of a legitimate shelter, they've been trafficking dogs. I think Bella was part of it. And her puppies." She paused, looking over at Bella, who was now watching them with those sad, trusting eyes. "They're the next victims. They've been bred for one purpose, and that's to be sold." Elijah's mind spun. He couldn't grasp it. He had never imagined that something like this could be happening in his small, quiet town. Snowfield, with its peaceful streets and friendly neighbors, seemed like the last place such horrors would exist. But the more he listened to Dr. Thompson, the more he realized that the darkness was already there, hidden beneath the surface. And it was coming for Bella and her puppies. Dr. Thompson leaned closer, her voice barely a whisper. "This is bigger than you realize, Elijah. The man running the operation, Marcus Crawford, he's not just a businessman. He's a predator, and he's got his hands in everything here." The name hit Elijah like a slap. He had heard of Marcus Crawford, the real estate mogul who had recently bought up land around Snowfield. Everyone had praised his efforts, calling him a visionary, someone who would help revitalize the town. But Elijah had never trusted him. Something about Crawford's slick demeanor had always rubbed him the wrong way. And now, hearing Dr. Thompson's words, he realized why. "Crawford," Elijah repeated, his voice barely audible. "But I thought he was just a developer. What does he have to do with this?" Dr. Thompson took a deep breath. "He's been behind this for years. I've seen the signs, dogs showing up at a shelter, all with the same star-shaped marking in their ears. Dogs that disappear. Dogs are never seen again. It's all part of a system, Elijah. A network of breeders, suppliers, and buyers. And Marcus Crawford is the man at the center of it. Elijah felt the weight of her words sink into his chest. His mind raced, but a part of him, deep down, knew it was true. He had already seen the signs, the strange behavior of the shelter workers, the sudden changes in the animals there. And the way Crawford's name seemed to pop up in every conversation, every event, and every deal around town. His gaze shifted to Bella, who was now resting her head on her paws, exhausted from the long journey and the strain of her condition. Her trust in him was palpable, and in that moment, Elijah made a decision. He would protect her. He would protect her puppies, no matter what it took. But as he looked at Dr. Thompson, the weight of the situation became clear. This wasn't just about a stray dog seeking refuge. This was about something much larger, something far more dangerous. And Elijah, the reclusive potter who had shut himself off from the world for 5 years, was now caught in the center of a battle that would shake Snowfield to its core. The days following Dr. Thompson's visit passed in a blur of tense silence. Elijah couldn't shake the feeling that the storm outside mirrored the storm brewing within his small town. Every creak of the wind against his workshop's walls seemed like a prelude to something larger. The quiet, solitary life he'd built around pottery and memories was slowly disintegrating. And in its place, a darker, more urgent fight was taking root. Elijah's eyes constantly strayed to Bella, who now nursed her puppies with an instinctual gentleness. Her swollen belly had given way to the life within her, a new beginning amid the chaos. But even as the puppies thrived, Elijah couldn't escape the weight of the looming danger. Crawford's network, the animal trafficking operation, was drawing closer, its tendrils creeping through the town's seams, threatening to tear everything apart. One evening, as Elijah worked the clay at his wheel, his hands trembling with the strain of recent revelations, he heard a faint knock at the door. This time, he wasn't surprised to find Dr. Thompson standing there, her face tight with worry. Behind her was a young woman, clutching a folder tightly to her chest. "Elijah, we have more," Dr. Thompson said, her voice low. "This is Linda Parker. She used to volunteer at the shelter before Crawford took over. She has information that might help." Linda stepped forward, her hands shaking slightly as she handed Elijah the folder. "I've been watching them, watching Crawford and his operations. I've seen too much, and I can't stay silent anymore." Elijah took the folder, his mind racing. He had no idea what was inside, but from the look in Linda's eyes, he knew it was important. The three of them sat down in front of the fire, and Linda began to speak, her voice a mixture of fear and resolve. "I knew something was wrong," she began. "When Crawford took over the shelter, things started to change. Dogs started disappearing, and the new staff, they weren't like the old crew. It felt like he was hiding something. But I didn't have the proof until recently." Linda pulled out a series of photographs, each one depicting pregnant dogs in various stages of distress. There were also shipping manifests, pictures of unmarked vans arriving late at night, and an alarming set of financial documents. "This is it," Linda said, her voice tight with emotion. "I've been tracking shipments. Dogs marked with that star-shaped tattoo. It's a breeding ring, Elijah. Crawford is running it, and he's using his shelter as a front." Elijah stared at the photos, the sickening truth sinking in deeper with each image. He recognized the dogs in the pictures, recognized their suffering. Bella's past was a part of something far larger than he'd ever imagined. He felt a surge of anger rise in his chest. All these years of hiding, of retreating from the world, had led him to this moment. Bella, her puppies, and the other dogs, they all needed him. This was no longer just a matter of protecting his own solitude. It was about fighting back, standing against the injustice that had permeated Snowfield. "Do you know what happens to these dogs after they're sold?" Elijah asked, his voice cold, his hands clenched into fists. Linda nodded. "They're sold to the highest bidders. families looking for purebred pets. But what they don't know is that these dogs are often sick, malnourished, and have been bred nonstop for years. It's a cycle of cruelty, Elijah, one that Crawford is profiting from. Elijah's mind raced. How had he missed all of this? It seemed impossible that such an operation had been going on under his nose, right in his own town. But then, the more he thought about it, the more everything started to make sense. The strange behavior at the shelter, the sudden rise in construction and development, and the way people like Crawford had managed to manipulate the community, they were all part of the same web of corruption. Dr. Thompson leaned forward. Elijah, we need to act. But it's not going to be easy. Crawford has eyes everywhere, and his influence stretches far beyond the shelter. He controls the town's businesses, its politics. He's not going to let us expose him without a fight. Elijah nodded, his mind already working through the next steps. There was no turning back now. He had to protect Bella and her puppies. But he also had to stop Crawford before more dogs suffered. The evidence they had was a start, but it wasn't enough. They needed more, proof that could bring down the entire operation. A plan began to form in Elijah's mind, a dangerous one, but one that could expose Crawford for what he truly was. He could feel the weight of his old life, his grief, his isolation, fall away with each step he took toward action. The man who had hidden from the world for so long was coming back. And this time, he wouldn't retreat. The storm outside had passed, leaving Snowfield blanketed in snow, a quiet, serene beauty hiding the dark undercurrents that had taken root in the town. Elijah's workshop had become more than just a place to create pottery. It had become a fortress, a symbol of resistance. With the evidence from Linda and the documentation gathered by Dr. Thompson, Elijah knew they had to move quickly. The legal battle was growing tense, the threats more tangible, and every step they took seemed to stir the nest of corruption that Marcus Crawford had built. They couldn't wait any longer. Crawford's grip on the town was tightening, and every day they delayed, the risk of losing Bella and her puppies grew. Dr. Thompson arrived one cold morning, carrying with her a large stack of legal documents. "We're ready," she said, her voice steady but laced with the tension of everything they were about to face. "It's time to go public. We have enough evidence now to press charges." Elijah stood up from his wheel, the clay still sticky on his hands. His heart was pounding, not just from the pressure of the situation, but from something deeper, something more personal. He thought of Sarah, of Emma, and how they had been taken from him. He thought of Charlie, the dog they had saved, and how that dog had unknowingly opened his eyes to the kind of person Marcus Crawford really was. Now here he was, standing at the threshold of a fight that would not only protect Bella and her puppies, but bring down the man who had taken so much from him. "I'll do whatever it takes," Elijah said, his voice firm. The weight of his words settled deep in his chest. "We're not just fighting for Bella. We're fighting for every dog he's hurt." Dr. Thompson nodded, her gaze focused. "We got the evidence, Elijah. But it's not just going to be about the dogs. It's going to be about exposing Crawford's entire operation. We need witnesses. We need people to stand up to be brave." The first step in their plan was to gather support. They reached out to the few in Snowfield who hadn't been silenced by Crawford's influence. People like Mrs. Sullivan, who had supported Elijah since the beginning, and the Carters, whose testimony about Bella's injuries had become crucial to the case. They knew the town was divided, but they also knew that there were still those who believed in doing what was right. As they prepared for the town hall meeting where they would present their case, a sense of determination filled Elijah. This wasn't just a battle for the truth. It was a fight for justice. It was a fight to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. And in a way, it was a fight for his own redemption. The night before the meeting, Elijah sat by the fire with Bella and her puppies. Buddy, the smallest puppy, had taken to following him everywhere, his bright eyes watching Elijah with an intensity that felt almost like understanding. Elijah's hand rested on Buddy's head, and for the first time in years, he felt a spark of something familiar, hope. The next day, they made their way to the town hall. The streets were quiet, but there was an undercurrent of anticipation in the air. Elijah could feel the eyes of the town on him, the whispers that followed him from the moment he stepped out of his house. But this time, it didn't matter. This time, he wasn't alone. When the meeting began, Elijah stood at the front, his hands trembling slightly, but his resolve unwavering. Dr. Thompson presented the evidence first, photographs of the abused dogs, the shipping manifests, and the financial records. But the most powerful moment came when Linda Parker stepped forward. She spoke of what she had witnessed at the shelter, the disappearing dogs, the late-night shipments, and the cruel conditions the animals were kept in. Her voice, though shaky, rang with the truth, and as she spoke, the room fell silent. Elijah could see the doubt beginning to slip from the eyes of the townspeople. They were beginning to see Crawford for what he truly was, a man who had lied to them, manipulated them, and used them to build his empire of cruelty. But it wasn't enough just to expose him. They needed to act. The tension in the room was palpable as Elijah took the floor. His voice was steady, the weight of his words heavier than ever. Crawford is not just a businessman. He's a predator, and we've all been his prey. Elijah began. He's been hiding in plain sight, running a network of animal abuse and trafficking right here in Snowfield. And I won't let him get away with it any longer. His words echoed through the room, and for the first time, Elijah didn't feel the isolation that had plagued him for so long. The support was slow at first, but then it began to grow. Mrs. Sullivan stood up next, her voice strong as she defended Elijah and the truth of his actions. Slowly, others followed. Town members who had once whispered in the corners now stood with him, with Bella, with the puppies. As the evidence mounted and the truth was revealed, it became clear Crawford's empire was crumbling. But the battle wasn't over yet. There was still the matter of the law, and Elijah knew that Crawford wouldn't go down without a fight. The next few days brought a flurry of activity, court orders, legal challenges, and threats. But Elijah had already made up his mind. He wasn't backing down. That night, as they waited for the court's final ruling, Elijah sat by the fire again, Bella resting beside him, her puppies now thriving under her care. Buddy crawled into his lap, his small body warm against Elijah's chest. For the first time in years, Elijah didn't feel alone. The weight of the past was still heavy on his heart, but it was no longer suffocating him. With Bella, Buddy, and the other puppies by his side, Elijah had found the strength to stand tall again. As the town slowly began to heal, so did Elijah. And in the process, he realized that healing wasn't a solitary journey. It was something that happened when people came together, when they stood up for what was right no matter the cost. And as he looked down at Buddy, his bond with the little puppy that had changed everything, Elijah finally understood some battles weren't just about surviving. In the darkest moments, when the weight of grief feels unbearable, it's the unexpected relationships we form that can help us heal. Elijah's fight for Bella and her puppies wasn't just about rescuing animals. It was about finding hope again, about standing up for what's right, and about finding the courage to step back into the world, no matter how daunting it may seem. What can we learn from Elijah's journey? Sometimes, healing comes not just from what we can give, but from what we are willing to stand up and protect. What did you think of Elijah's journey and his fight for justice? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to stand up for what's right, even when it seemed impossible? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the HeartForce channel for more heartwarming, inspirational stories.